And we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vilsan broadcasting from Berlad, let's say, from the very far east of Romania, just 20 kilometers away from the border with the former Soviet Union. As always, alongside with me is Herr Jon Gunnarsson, broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer, James Huff, making sure everything works just fine, broadcasting from the States. Greetings, Mr. Gunnarsson.
Good evening. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to be back too, although from a very weird setup. I haven't been broadcasting in this format for quite some time. I think only once since I've been doing this show for the last almost actually more than 3.5 years. Amazing.
It would be absurd to make a law that says that you can't be persuasive in making a particular kind of case. That would just completely undermine any sort of notion of free speech.
Not only that, but it would ban politics itself. I mean, if persuasion is forbidden, then why are we in the business of politics? Let's just install an all-encompassing, all-knowing dictator, and we're done with it. If persuasion is illegal.
Yeah, it just need to go about finding that all-knowing dictator.
That's going to present quite a logistical problem for sure. Right, let's go to the next one.
Okay, the next one is from Germany. It's from Zeit, and it's an interview which is entitled "At Some Point, Their Strength is at an End. Violence against and disrespect of policewomen is a problem," says the police union. Nevertheless, they are significantly less likely to be victims than their male colleagues. This is an interview with a spokeswoman of the police union. So the interviewer: "Today is International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women." So this aired on the 25th of November, or was published. Seeing how you as a representative for the police union are here to raise awareness for the situation, how bad are things for policewomen? Dagmar Hertz: "Previously, we always used the 25th of November to put the focus on those who we protect. We provided information on domestic violence, forced marriage, and human trafficking. But the number of female officers who are insulted, cussed at, and spit at is rising. This is becoming a great burden. If those who are supposed to serve and protect do not receive any support, their strength is at an end at some point." How big is the problem? According to police statistics, about 11,000 female officers were affected. We're talking about resistance to police officers and assault, but also bodily injury. According to these statistics, 17.5% of the victims are female officers. How does it relate to the total number of women in the police force? There are probably about 30 to 35% women in the respective police forces of the various Bundesländer. But this means that women are less likely to be victims. That's right, but the numbers are rising. In the past, women were affected very rarely. They were protected by their femaleness. In the past, when we sent out a mixed patrol, we could assume that the woman would simply resolve any conflict verbally. Men were reluctant to attack a woman. Insults have always been present, but the frequency has increased massively, and it becomes burdensome. We have noticed that at demonstrations, some people specifically seek out the women in the police ranks to attack there. Skipping a bit here. Again, the interviewer: "Doesn't this problem also affect policemen?" Of course. They have always been affected more. Men are also insulted, spit at, and physically assaulted. With women, this is now reaching a new level. How come? I'm afraid we have a problem with people from Muslim countries, since these men are not familiar with women in uniform and do not respect them. Some female colleagues from the federal police working at the Frankfurt airport have reported that there are some passengers who refuse to even talk to them. They then have to call their male colleagues if they do not want to escalate the situation. Skipping another couple of paragraphs here. How can police women and men be better protected? The police union supports a new law which specifically penalizes violence against police, firefighters, and rescue workers. The penalty for assistance to law enforcement was already increased in 2011, with the maximum jail time going from 2 to 3 years. Did that help? No. But you have to look at this in detail. Currently, officers are only protected through this law when they are in the process of enforcing law. If they get attacked while they are only standing around in uniform, the law doesn't apply. This is why we need to widen the scope of the law. This would be a signal to police officers. However, it wouldn't solve the problem. To do that, people have to think about who the uniformed person standing opposite them is and why there is police in Germany. These people do their duty for all of society and try to ensure our safety. They deserve our appreciation.
Translation: police women are starting to be treated a lot more equally than in the past. Am I wrong with this analysis?
Nope.
I mean, it just so seems like, oh, in the past, police women were somehow protected either because men were reluctant to attack police women or because their male colleagues would protect them more or whatever. But as of 2011 or whatever, in the last several years, police women are starting to get to feel the brunt of being a police officer a lot more equally with their male counterparts. Why aren't the feminists celebrating this? I mean, they should, shouldn't they? I mean, if the goal indeed is identical slash equal treatment of women and men in all areas of society and work and whatnot, then this should be counted as progress, shouldn't it?
Yeah, at least according to their standards.
Well, I'm holding them to their own standards. Now, I don't think this is a good news. Violence against the police is abhorrent and should obviously be curbed. But by their standards, this should be counted as progress, or at the very least, somehow of a progress. But then again,
Yeah.
I would assume that the left actually cares about blue lives, which they usually don't. But that's a different story. They generally tend to think that all cops are bastards. That's yeah. So anyway, but yeah, I mean, this should be counted as progress. Now, I had no idea that November 25th is the International Violence, whatever the day.
International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women.
Yeah, that one. Uh, I had no idea that there is another one because there is another one on March 8th, and then there's another one somewhere in June. So how many of them are there really out there? So, but I don't know what to say. I mean, why aren't they celebrating? That's all I had to say. I mean, why don't you celebrate? This is a proof of equality. Maybe you don't like equality, and I can understand why you don't, but uh, that's what you've been advocating for the last 40 years, or probably even more.
Yeah, it's though I actually have to give credit to the interviewer here,
Yes.
who was quite well informed and who immediately pointed out the problems in this narrative that
Hmm.
so many women are assaulted. Immediately asked, well, what are the numbers for men, and how does this relate to this percentage to the percentage of women in the police force? And
Hmm.
immediately realized that it actually means that women are significantly less likely to be assaulted.
Yeah, I was surprised about that too when you sent me the link last night. Oh my God, the interviewer is actually willing to ask the questions, which wasn't the case in the past, in the very recent past. But yeah, the interviewer definitely did a tremendous job. But nevertheless, I mean, and also credit, I guess, to the spokesperson of the police union, I think was right.
Yes.
Um, Credit to her for the willingness to say, look, there is a problem with individuals from the Muslim community, because at the end of the day, it is true that all criminals, male and female, would definitely try, if they want to attack the police, they will try to attack where the police is the weakest. And whether that's triggering or not, that means you attack the female police officers. I mean, if you have 20 police officers guarding a building and 17 of them are men and 3 of them are women, the best shot is to try to attack first where the women are. It's not rocket science. It's just an increased likelihood of success. With that said, there is indeed a problem with the Muslim individuals because they tend to be accustomed with a different standard of policing, and that is to say, there are no police women, police officers, female police officers, and yeah, they tend to respect them less. But then again, police does in general, male or female, doesn't enjoy a high level of respectability in many societies.
Yeah. Also, this thing about increasing the penalties for assaulting law officers and so on. Um, I don't think that's a good idea. There are already laws that make it more of a crime to assault, to insult, and so on. Um, Police officers and other government officials. We don't need any more of that. Of course, police officers shouldn't be attacked, but then neither should anyone else. And it seems to me rather weird that we have these much greater protections for people whose job it is to deal with violent, dangerous people who are armed, who are trained at dealing with those situations. Um, and we have lesser protections for just ordinary people who are not trained to deal with these situations.
Yes, and also in the interview, it is mentioned that the penalties for that have already been increased 5 years ago, and it didn't work. It didn't help in any way.
Yep.
So it would kind of be the definition of insanity to to do again the very thing that has already been tried and failed and didn't help in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
This shows. I mean, those who did genuinely believe that increasing the penalties in the law would help anyone are the kind of people that can be found across the pond in the states arguing for more gun control. They don't seem to understand that if a criminal is willing to beat the crap out of a police officer, that criminal is very likely to not give a toss whether the penalty for doing that is 2 years and 6 months in jail or 2 years and 8 months in jail. I mean, it just doesn't matter. Just like in the cases of gun violence. I don't like the terminology gun violence, but whatever. If they're willing to get into a crowd and shoot a bunch of people, they don't really care that it is an extra crime to just have the gun to begin with. It is really that simple. And there used to be a time in the past where police officers in almost all European countries would seem to have a better understanding of how criminals think. Whereas these days, police officers and police forces tend to be used as social advocacy a lot more and a lot less about curbing crime.
Yeah. So basically, the idea is that also, so you've killed a bunch of people with a gun in a gun-free zone. So therefore, we're going to throw you in jail forever, basically, and also give you a fine for carrying a gun illegally.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just madness.
So we sentence you to 300 years in jail and a $2,000 fine.
Yeah, no, and then force the family to pay for it, basically. Yeah. All right, let's go to the next one, and here comes the silly place. Coming from dagensmedia.se. Stockholm kan bli först i landet med förbud mot sexistisk reklam. I think the title is pretty much self-translatory. Stockholm can be the first town in the country to forbid sexist advertising. And goes like this. The political leadership in the city of Stockholm will begin work to develop ethical guidelines for advertising. It's remarkably written article, grammatically speaking. Earlier this autumn, the Swedish Women's Lobby conducted an audit which examined how gender discriminatory advertising in the Nordic Union looks like. The report showed that all countries need to work more actively against sexist advertising, but that Sweden is the worst in the classroom. That Sweden is the only Nordic country that has no regulations against sexist advertising. The matter may soon change, at least in the capital city, when the political leadership in Stockholm will begin working to develop ethical guidelines for advertising. It says so, amongst other things, written in the Traffic Board business description for the next year, which is expected to go through today, December the 8th. That would be yesterday. The initiative can make Stockholm the first in the country to ban sexist advertising. The guidelines would not apply, for example, to Storstockholm's local traffic subway and bus shelters belonging to the county council. However, they would apply to the sites that the city itself owns, such as advertising display, lampposts, and cultural boards. Malin Eriksson, who is the Feminist Initiative representative in the Traffic Committee, says to Dagens Media that the guidelines are needed to enable people to avoid having to face distorted ideals of especially women's bodies in their daily lives. The public space is a part of people's everyday lives and where you should not have sexualized messages imposed on them in trying to sell stuff with women's bodies. She also mentions a study from 2014, also conducted by the Swedish Women's Lobby, which showed that 9 out of 10 young women are affected by the sexist advertising and that it makes them feel bad about their bodies. It is very essential to be able to move freely around the world without ever having to set oneself against these ideals, continues Malin Eriksson. Just like the women's lobby, the feminist initiative believes that the industry's self-sanitizing agency, the advertising ombudsman, the reklamsombudsmannen, is not enough. I think it is quite clear that it is not enough. If it had been so, if it had been so, we would not have had to work out the guidelines for advertising. Sure, it is great that the advertising ombudsman exists. It certainly counteracts the worst of the advertising, but it takes more than that. Some oppose the idea that it is possible to define what constitutes sexist advertising. How can the guidelines be even developed? It is difficult for me to say at the moment. As a politician, I can only wish the way I want them to look like and then send the requests to the traffic office. Then there will be a proposal that the traffic tribunal may consider, but I am concerned about how such guidelines would end up looking like. What do you hope will be the impact of ethical guidelines for advertising? I hope that the effect will be that advertisers will simply stop trying to sell their goods and services using women's bodies. Since it is important to point out that there will be policies that consider that the advertising that is approved, it will be a matter left to the transport authority. There are those who are not so enthusiastic about the new policy at all. Politicians should not take the lead in these sorts of restrictions and on freedom of expression. We have other things to do, like make sure it is safe and clean and empty the bins, for example, said Cecilia Brink from the Moderate Party, opposition mayor and deputy chairman of the traffic committee for Dagens Nyheter. Trondheim, Norway's third largest city, has already decided not to rent out advertising space for photos that can lead to problems with their own body image for those who are forced to look at them. London has also banned sexist advertising in public transport. This kind of language, banning photos that can lead to problems with body image for those who are forced to look at them. I didn't know there is an epidemic of, fascist goons forcing pedestrians to look at all the advertising everywhere on the street. I had no idea that such problem even exists.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Go ahead.
It's like that scene in Clockwork Orange where Alex is forced to watch these films with his eyes being propped open with the whatever you call them, Uh, Probably that's what's going on in Swedish streets. But and apparently Cecilia Brink is the last voice of reason. Yeah, it would really be better if politicians focus on things like making sure that rubbish bins are empty, rather than coming up with this sort of nonsense.
Yeah, and in the case of the transport authority, the Stockholm's traffic, maybe they should also consider working closer with the police in some metro station. I would say, for instance, the Husby area, the north west, I think, of the capital city, where the sexist advertising is probably the least amount of problem. The pickpocketer and the fact that you can get a very big beating if you're too white in that area. I think there are bigger issues too. And of course, the feminist snow plowing. I mean, again, this is Stockholm. I mean, there are quite a few significantly more important areas of policy to be solved or to be addressed in the Swedish capital rather than the sexist advertising, whatever that means. I mean, it seems to me that if there is a beautiful woman there, then that's a problem. That seems to me the definition under which these advocates are operating under, both the women's lobby and the feminist initiative, which, by the way, it's a political party in Sweden because it's Sweden.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they do exist in Norway too, but Norwegians are far more sensible. They never vote for them. Uh, but in Sweden, they actually do have a few local councillors and even a member of the European Parliament. I mean, Sweden is a very special place. But yeah, I mean, it just seems to me that and this is and again, this thing with sexist advertising, it doesn't seem to be necessarily a Swedish problem. If anything, Sweden is late to the party. It's London that they also mentioned in the Dagens Media article, but it's also Rome. If you remember in a previous show,
Mhm.
maybe 2 months ago or something like that, we discussed that in Rome, and it almost always seemed to be the same kind of rhetoric. If there is a beautiful woman there, then that's definitely a problem. It's never a problem when it's a man, regardless of whether it's a very fit or beautiful man or an ugly man. It's never a problem if it's a man. And also, if it's a relatively average or less than average, a very ugly woman, again, it's not necessarily a problem. It's only a problem if it's a beautiful woman, which is basically uh, the exact kind of character that everyone appreciates, both women and men.
Yeah. And I would actually like to hear from the models who are actually earning money from these kinds of from these ads.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe they don't really appreciate how women are protected from sexism by them by them losing their jobs. Maybe they might have a different opinion.
Yeah, for sure. A similar initiative almost a year ago, if you remember, that was discussed in Russia as well. But then again, in Russia, pretty much everyone was like, "This is retarded. That's never going to happen." And there, actually, this argument was put forth. Look, there's a lot of rather poor girls who have a very nice body that make a lot of money by working in this industry. Why should this be banned? But then again, I presume this kind of argument would be considered hate speech if you put it forth in the Stockholm City Hall. I wouldn't be surprised if there would be even a law to punish you for.
Yeah, probably that makes it even worse because these poor young women are being exploited for their body, and that's very degrading. And they should be grateful that these far-thinking feminists um, have liberated them from their oppressors, and now they
And
should
making
just
sure.
join them in the proletarian revolution and overthrow the patriarchy and the capitalism, and then we're going to have a utopia where you don't actually have to work for a living, and then everything's going to be fine.
Mhm. And until then, they should enjoy their perpetual poverty.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make some sacrifices.
Yeah, it is really amazing. And the next piece of news is also to the same tune. It just seems to me that feminists are extremely busy, and especially the far left feminists are extremely busy in making sure women stay poor, basically. Because again, especially in these cheap shot advertising billboards and whatnot, usually the models who work there are at the beginning of their career. They're usually poor. Those are usually the first big bucks that they win in their lifetimes. It's usually their shot to climb up the ladder of the industry. So all these kinds of forward-thinking feminists, as you put it, uh, they just make sure that women stay poor. I mean, they should pretty much decide themselves. Do you want women to be independent on themselves or not? Because banning every industry where they can actually start climbing up the ladder actually makes sure that they don't become independent.
But then you see that's brilliant because then there's going to be more female victims, and that means that feminism has a stronger case to make.
Fair enough, I
Because you
guess.
see, what once women are successful and a lot of women earn a lot of money, then that whole wage gap starts diminishing, and it's going to be much more representation of women in all sorts of fields. That's of course a bad thing for feminism because then they no longer have this victimhood status. So it's actually a good thing if they prevent it.
Yeah, fair enough. Although there's still mansplaining and the mansplaining hotline, also a Stockholm initiative. I mean, you're underestimating their ability to find victimhood in everything. I mean, um, uh, at this rate, in 10 years, we're going to find, probably also starting from Sweden, the National Stair Rape Act of 2025 or something like that. uh, their capacity to find new ways of being victimized is it seems quite endless. I mean, whenever you think you've seen full Sweden or full feminism, you just wait another week and there's going to be a new surprise for sure. Right. Let's go to the next one, which is also from Sweden. This is a recurring theme. It's a discussion that we also had probably 6 months ago or something like that. Coming from Sveriges Radio, the national taxpayer funded radio station, the Christian Democrats are now open to the idea of punishing the buying of sex abroad. The government and the leftist party want to make it a criminal offense to buy sex abroad. If you remember, we discussed the piece of news where, at the time. Among other parties, the resistance has been great, but now the Christian Democrats are willing to vote in favor of a future proposal in this regard. We think, of course, that buying sex is unacceptable wherever it occurs. I think that criminalization of sex purchases abroad could be a way to discourage the buying of sex, whilst waiting for other countries to take Sweden's lead and pass a similar sex purchase law that we have, says Andreas Karlsson, the Christian Democrat group leader and legal policy spokesperson. In his first statement after the election, Prime Minister Stefan Löfven said that the purchase of sexual services abroad should be criminalized. The government's own investigators have been discouraged from making such a change in the law. The most important reason is that in most other countries it is not forbidden to buy sex from adults. But Justice Minister Morgan Johansson said that the government intends to present a bill next year to the parliament in which Swedes who buy sex in other countries would be punished. I'll put this matter very closely to the larger issue of trafficking and sexual slavery. I see this as an effective instrument to reduce the phenomena. If you have that belief, then it is natural to move on to the parliament with it. But what do you think, the interviewer, what do you think that such a law would have in effect? I think it will have a deterrence effect. When Swedes go abroad and some might have thought about buying sex, then they will know that there is an opportunity for the Swedish judicial system to actually intervene, even if this has occurred abroad. The leftist party has long been pushing for criminalizing the purchase of sex abroad, but the government needs the support of another political party in the parliament to push through with the proposal. And the question is, politically speaking, very controversial. The Sweden Democrats, the Center Party, the Liberals, liberals and the moderate party or the conservatives say no to such a ban. It is clear that we do not think about buying sex abroad. However, it is so that it respects the international law in various countries. If we begin to punish the Swedes in Sweden for anything they have done in a country where that is legal, then we are breaking this international practice. Then the great risk that is that the others will start pushing people for what they do, punishing people, sorry, for what they do in Sweden, but that is perfectly legal here, says the Justice Committee chairman Beatrice Ask of the Moderate Party. But the Christian Democrats may therefore expect to go against the rest of the alliance and vote for the upcoming bill. Parliamentary group, however, are waiting for the final bill before issuing their final position, said the team leader Andreas Karlsson. The Christian Democrats parliamentary group decided to work for the idea that the sex purchase law shall apply even when offenders are on a holiday abroad. If Sweden now wants to be a role model in this area, I think this is an important legislative change, added Desiree Petrus, Christian Democrats' gender equality policy spokesperson. So, we might actually see it through. I mean, if the Christian Democrats mean it, there's still quite a lot of time for this to become law before the next elections.
Just when you thought that Sweden had hit peak feminism, then there's never any peak feminism. It's just always almost an upwards.
Yeah, just as I was saying earlier,
more progress to be made.
Yeah, if you think you've seen peak Sweden, just wait for another week, and there's going to be a new surprise.
You know,
go ahead.
Probably the same thing as peak oil. It's been predicted for decades. It's still hasn't happened, and who knows?
It's very unlikely to ever happen. Go ahead.
I mean, at some point, it's going to run out. I mean, there's just there's a finite amount of oil on Earth, just like there's a finite amount of feminist things you can do. So at some point, it's going to run out just out of logical necessity. But yeah, it's just not looking like it's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah. Now, if this thing, I mean, the lady from Beatrice Oscar from the Moderate Party, which is the think of how cucked Sweden is. The Moderate Party is now the far right, the Conservative Party. So there's that. I mean, she has a point when she says, "Look, if we do this, then maybe others will start doing the same thing." And I wonder if the Swedish leftists, the leftist party, the Vänsterpartiet, and their cucked allies are willing to apply their own principle, I don't know, to gays who travel from Saudi Arabia to avoid being beheaded and they travel to Sweden. If they're willing to, I don't know, extradite those gays back to Saudi Arabia, if Saudi Arabia asks it and say, look, they're committing a sin there that is illegal here. Or maybe women who travel from Ireland to Sweden to get an abortion. I'm seriously asking, are they willing to extend that principle? And I mean, if we are to break international standards, why not break it entirely?
Of course, they're not willing to do that. It's not about principles. It's just about winning. It's just about which side you're on. And yeah, as long as you're on the side of progress, then you can do whatever you want, as long as it's progressive. And if you're not, then it's wrong. The principles don't come into it.
Yes, but from my cynical / Machiavellian / practical politics first perspective, I'm secretly rooting for them to actually implement this disdainful nonsense. Because as I'm sure you know as well, and most of the people listening to us or watching, they also know, there is a serious disagreement amongst the right-on, hard-on progressive circles on the topic of prostitution. There is, on one side, the ones that say it's progressive to have legalized prostitution and whatnot. And then there is the hardline Saudi Arabia-style feminists in Sweden who say that prostitution is haram, basically, and should be banned everywhere all the time for all the reasons and so on. I mean, there is a serious disagreement there, and if they manage to push this through, which they might not succeed, but if they succeed, there would it would deepen the differences between the two camps within the progressive movement. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a very good news, because the more fragmented they are, the easier they are to basically be defeated. I mean, I would love to see in the next Swedish elections a much wider support for the non-leftist sides, basically the moderate party and the Sweden Democrats.
Yep.
Because even in the last two articles, the only sane positions always came from the Sweden Democrats and the moderate party. So maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be such a bad idea for the next government to be an alliance between the moderates and the quote unquote far right, because again, the Sweden Democrats are as far right as, I don't know, maybe Theresa May, maybe. So they're really not that bad. So I don't know if they manage to. But then again, if they even if they do manage to put it through, they will also become increasingly isolated as a country within their little club, the Nordic Union. Because right now, for instance, the highest amount of sex buying abroad by Swedish citizens happens in Denmark, and especially with people living in the southwestern part of Sweden who can easily get to Copenhagen with just an hour of driving or even less. So what are they going to do? Force Denmark to report back to Sweden every time a Swedish citizen has legally bought a service legally available in Denmark? I mean, what are they actually going to do? Arrest everyone who comes back from Denmark on the suspicion that they might have bought sex whilst being in Copenhagen? I mean, I'm asking basically a practical politics question here in the implementation part. How do you implement such a policy?